That was so good.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it.
No, what did I do wrong? I want to know.
Well, sex for me is kind of this combo of envy and desire.
Envy? Like, envy of who?
Girls have so much more power. It's like your choker. The skin is melting with the flesh. It's almost obscuring you.
I mean, it's just plastic.
Right, but it represents this sense of submission. But you're in control because you're wearing it. It's like you're saying, you can have me, but only if I want you to.
He's AGP.
What?
AGP, autogynephilia.
I don't know what you're talking about. Autogynephilia.
Autogynephilia, a man's love of himself as a woman. He's a transvestite, honey. And you're the muse.
Ethan is not that, Natasha. He's just a guy. He's just a straight guy.
AGPs are straight. They're like the straightest a guy can be. They love pussy so much they want one of their own.
This just sounds like some weird-ass Tucker Carlson shit that you've heard on Red Scare. Ethan is not an AGP.
Listen, doll, all I'm saying is be careful. He's probably at your place right now, trying on your clothes and fapping to sissy hypnosis.
Thing is that if you looked at my DMs and the type of people that message me and the pictures they have, it is abundantly clear that many of them would probably call themselves straight and have families, have wives already. And I'm done being gaslit into people saying those people are just gay. No, they're straight. They just into us.
Okay. So we just watched a clip of this movie, Envy Desire, which just came out, directed by Amy, who's on Twitter, and she has made all kinds of trans people mad at her for making this movie, talking about envy, desire, and autogynephilia. And the premise of the movie is that Bella is a trans woman and she's dating a guy who she thinks is just a regular straight guy. But then he ends up, trying on her clothes, like watching Sissy Hypno, and then, sort of transitioning and like wanting to be one of the girls. So there's, and then there's like the subcontext of Blanchardian typology of autogynephilia, the theory of autogynephilia. So the claim is that, Ethan, the HB character, he is, he's not actually like a straight guy. He's only into Bella because he wants to be Bella. So he's like desirous of her, but he wants to be her. And that's kind of like the classic AGP. And then I juxtaposed that with another clip from another trans person who's asking the question, like, are straight guys into trans women? And this is like a classic thing. ContraPoints did this video a long time ago about like whether traps are gay and is it gay to be into trans women. And I want to look at this from a objective scientific perspective, because there actually has been some sexological empirical work looking into the question of what is the nature of the sexual orientation of the men who are typically into trans women. So let's actually look at some science here. Let me share my screen again. Okay. This paper came out in 2015 by Kevin Sue, I think is how you say his name, Rosenthal, Miller, and Michael Bailey. Michael Bailey is well known in the sexology field for talking about autogynephilia. So the title of the paper is "Who Are the Gynoandromorphophilic Men Characterizing Men with Sexual Interest in Transgender Women?" Gynoandromorphophilia, GAMP, is a sexual interest in in gyneandromorphs, gams, colloquially she-males, aka chicks with dicks, gams possess a combination of male and female physical characteristics. Thus, GAMP represents a challenge to conventional understandings of sexual orientation as sexual attraction to the male via the female form. Or versus the female form. Speculation about GAMP men has included the ideas that they're homosexual, heterosexual, or especially bisexual. And this is what we often see in the more conservative world. Well, they'll say like, oh, like is it is it gay to like trans women? And the answer is almost always in the conservative world that yes, it's gay to be into trans women. But other people think, no, it's more like bisexual or like, is it possible to be heterosexual and be into trans women? And the trans activists often want to say like, yes, straight guys, just regular straight heterosexual men, they can totally be into trans women, no problem whatsoever. Because trans women are women, and if you're attracted to trans women, that means that you are, perfectly straight. And they'll often use the example of like, oh, well, you could be attracted to a trans woman even if you don't know that she's trans, because sometimes trans women just like pass really well. So the idea is that you are attracted to trans women, because you're attracted to femininity. And since trans women can be very feminine, then you can be perfectly straight and be attracted to trans women. But that's a separate question of like knowing a trans woman is trans and then like intentionally, like purposefully, like dating her, being into her, particular if she's preoperative, she still has a penis. Okay, so this paper, they compared genital and subjective sexual arousal patterns of GAMP men with those of heterosexual and homosexual men. We also compared these groups on their self-ratings of sexual orientation and sexual interest. Results: GAMP men had arousal patterns similar to those of heterosexual men and different from those of homosexual men. However, compared to heterosexual men, GAMP men were relatively more aroused by GAM erotic stimuli, aka they were more aroused by trans porn than by female erotic stimuli. GAMP men also scored higher than both heterosexual and homosexual men on a measure of autogynephilia. So this is where the envy desire thing comes in, because this is the idea is that, and it's very common in the trans community for eggs, aka people who don't know that they're trans yet. So it's trans women eggs. They're like men. They identify as men, but they're going to later identify as trans women, but they don't know they're trans yet. It's very common for these quote unquote eggs to date trans women, and then through that dating process, eventually later come to identify as trans and then transition. Like dating the trans woman is often a form of exploration. And this makes sense on the theory of autogynephilia, because autogynephilia is a theory that says that the most common pathway to gender dysphoria for trans women is through this autogynephilic pathway, which is basically an erotic pathway. You discover your gender identity through the mechanism of the erotic. And so if these GAMP men are scoring higher on measures of autogynephilia, then that's going to explain the Envy Desire movie, where you have the Ethan character. He just starts off as a regular straight guy dating a trans woman, totally straight, and then later he goes on to transition, and wearing her clothes, transitioning, taking her estrogen pills. So let's actually look at the research here. So they here we go. So patterns of baseline controlled genital arousal and raw subjective arousal to the different types of erotic stimuli separated by participant groups. So you have the heterosexuals who show this sort of pattern, which is and then you have the homosexuals. So this actually clearly shows that that GAMPs, aka men who have dated trans women, show arousal patterns that are more similar to the heterosexual man compared to the homosexual man. So this definitively answers the question that trans men who are into trans women are not gay. They're not homosexual. If by homosexual we mean exclusively interested in men and exclusively attracted and only wanting to have sex with men. So GAMPs are more similar to heterosexuals. However, they're not identical to heterosexuals. So that's the sort of thing. It's like, yes, they are closer to heterosexuals, but they're not identical to regular heterosexuals. So
Thing is that if you looked at my DMs and the type of people that message me and the pictures they have, it is abundantly clear that many of them would probably call themselves straight and have families, have wives already. And I'm done being gaslit into people saying those people are just gay.
So yes, this person is saying like, yes, it is true. They're not gay, but they're also not perfectly straight either, because this is a distinctive pattern. Also evidenced by the fact that if you look at these GAMP and then you measure them on core autogynephilia scale, you compare heterosexual men, and the way you know they're heterosexual is based on whether or not they've ever on like their Kinsey scale versus also let's see whether or not they have ever had transsexual partners or female partners. So the GAMPs have had more transsexual partners versus the heterosexual men have not had transsexual partners. So that's how that is defined. But if you actually look at the GAMP men, the core autogynephilia scale is 2.8, bisexual GAMP men 5.2. So that's very strong. If you are into trans women and you consider yourself bisexual, it's very likely you're AGP. And if you're heterosexual, you also have a higher AGP scale. Now compare that to homosexual men who have a 0.06 AGP scale and heterosexual men who have a 0.35 AGP scale. So in other words, to translate this, the men who are into trans women are more likely to be AGP. So this is called autogynoandromorphophilia, such that you are attracted to trans women, but you also want to be a trans woman. And that is what the Envy Desire movie is getting at. That's what the whole film is about. It's about this envy desire thing. Like these AGP males are desirous of trans women, but they also are envious of trans women. And this is very common. Like when I identified as trans, I actually dated what I thought was a guy. And he turned out to be a she and later transitioned. And now I understand, like, he was almost certainly a autogyneandromorphophilia. He had a particular sexual interest in trans women, but that was just a way to sort of like deal with his AGP, and then he later turned into a she and transitioned later. And so yes, I personally experienced this when I was trans, and this is very common, and it even matches my own experience because my entry point into like trans identity was through trans pornography. I was very into trans pornography. I liked the quote unquote GAM, the gynoandromorph, the gandroandromorphs, the she-male, the chicks with dicks. I was into that from a pornographic perspective. I had an interest in that, but I also wanted to be that. When I watched that trans pornography, I wasn't imagining myself as the guy. I was imagining myself as the trans woman. And so it's very common. It's very common for trans women to be into trans women because the AGP, because these GAMPs are often AGP, and the AGP drives the development of the gender dysphoria, which drives the development of the gender identity, which then causes transition later in life. And this is why a lot of trans women will date each other. That this is the whole T for T, thing with trans women, where, this is driven by this GAMP phenomenon and the fact that, these GAMPs men turn into trans women because they have an attraction to trans women. They often date each other, even though they aren't otherwise attracted to the male body, particularly if they are the heterosexual type. But if they're the bisexual type, then it's even more likely to have the T for T, trans lesbian phenomenon. So hopefully this explained things. I just wanted to clear up some confusion, because often you have this question of like, are traps gay? Is it gay to be into trans women? And the answer is like, no, it is not gay to be into trans women, because gay men are not attracted to trans women. Gay men are attracted to males who are masculine. They are not attracted to that specific combination of femininity plus like the penis. Whereas the gynoandromorphophiliacs, they're into that combination, the male female combination. They're into that sort of like androgynous look. It's that particular combination of the of femininity plus male anatomy that is specific to the GAMP. But at the same time, they're not perfectly straight either. But so like they are, it's like its own thing. So so that hopefully this like answers the question, because there's been like a lot of confusion about this. So okay, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.